Pine Grove is a cozy little community off Belden Street in Falls Village, Connecticut. It was originally organized in the 19th century as a Methodist spiritual retreat. It's where Judy Dupree grew up in the 1940s and where her father was caretaker.
Well, my father married my grandmother and took over caretaking at Pine Grove, and I lived at Pine Grove until I was like in the 4th grade, and he built the house on the hill. But it was great fun growing up in Pine Grove. You had a lot of old-maid school teachers that came up in the summer, and they were always ready to teach you something. Mrs. Bartlett would take me wildflower hunting, and Mrs. Way would read me books. The person that lived in the first house, I can't remember their name, but he got me interested in stamp collecting. He had a pond with koi fish in it. And every year it was our job to collect the koi fish and bring them over and put them in our spring in the winter. And by gosh, they survived the winter, and we'd take them back over in the spring and put them in his pond. There was always something going on at the Grove. They had movies every Saturday night, and I think Mr. Michaels brought them up. And he was the house outside of the Pine Grove, the first house. And I think he had something to do with the movie industry. But we always had good movies to watch. And the ladies in the Grove taught me how to knit, and they taught me how to crochet, and I loved to read, so there was no...
Really?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. What type of books?
Oh, I like mystery books.
Mysteries. Did you get them from the library?
Yeah. And as you said, a lot of the ones that were up in the Grove were teachers, and they always had a whole bookshelf of books for children. And they would, knowing me, I was there, they would bring me up books too. As I said, it was a great place to grow up because it was a safe place.
How many people would you say lived in the Grove at that time?
Well, of course, being a kid like I was and never going out anywhere, more than 2 was a lot.
You had a lot of playmates there at the Grove?
Not too many, but they did. They had a tennis court up there. They had a sand lot up there. They had a lot of places where you could go and play. I don't remember too many people that I played with.
Huh.
I don't know whether there was more adults up there or not. I think at that time I can vaguely remember the hotel being up there too.
Hotel in front?
In Pine Grove. They had I know my mother worked there. They had a hotel.
I'll be darned.
They had their own church too, didn't they?
Yeah, they had their own church. At one time they had their own jail too.
You're right.
Long time ago. That I don't remember. I can remember the Grace girls getting in the houses in the wintertime. We had an awful time getting them out. They'd make such a mess. They didn't plug up the holes enough, and they got in and they made themselves at home until the people come up. Because as I said, we didn't plow it out in the wintertime, so once October, or school started, you didn't have too many people up there. Now you have people up there all the time. A lot of people live there all year round.
Where did they live when they weren't at Pine Grove?
Lots of them were from the city. There used to be a depot down there where Conklin's is, where they would used to get off for Pine Grove, and they would go across the back of our lot there over to the Grove. And there's still if you look, there's a path there where
there's a roadway
where the wagons went.
Yep.
That was a pretty going concern at one time, Pine Grove. A lot of people used to go there to visit and to go to camp meetings. And
how about you, Ray?
What do you want to know about
Ray's from Amenia.
I'm from Amenia.
Uh-huh.
I don't know when we came. We were just figuring out. We came over here sometime in the early 60s. Worked on the farm.
But you worked on the farm when you were a kid.
Well, yeah, my
All your
father,
life.
mother and father worked on a farm, and I did a lot of work on one of the farms that used to be up on McEnroe Farm. Used to be up on top of Depot Hill
In Armenia.
in Armenia,
Uh-huh.
and school was out, and he come over one morning because they used to put hay up in the loft with the old hay fork and the wet hay, and the horses would pull it up, and he asked me if I wanted to drive horses to pull the hay up, and I says I can try it. So I did that for one summer, and that worked out great. And of course, when the guys in the hay mill, when they want it dumped, they just holler, and the horses stop, and then they trip it, and the hay falls down, and they fork it where they want to. And that's how that happened. Well, the next year I came up and everything, he says, I got a surprise for you. He says, I got a trotter for you.
Who is that?
McEnroe, Joe McEnroe.
A friend of your family?
Yeah, he lived right in the city of Armenia.
We lived at Pine Grove until I was like 4th grade, and then my father built the brick house on the hill, and we moved up there. This house here belonged to my father's second wife, Catherine Smith, she was. And when her father got old, my father bought this place from him. The original farm is just across the road, just what you see there, that's what was there. And I was told at one time they grew tobacco on this field across the road where the corn is.
Really?
Yeah.
During
Probably in the early 1900s.
During the Depression and everything, yeah.
My mother never drove, so we used ourselves right there at the farm. There's plenty to do. We had pigs and we had some cows. I can remember we had mules before we had tractors. Chickens, lambs, which my father made a mistake about buying the lambs because we made pets, and one time when we came home from school, the lambs were gone. I still cannot eat lamb. I still cannot smell lamb being cooked. So as I said, there was always something to do. My grandmother lived with us, my mother's mother, and she made the bread and did most of the cooking. We fed all the guys that worked on the farm, which were mostly my uncles. My father had 8 people in his family, and 2 were girls and the rest were boys, so the men stayed on the farm or went into service, and when they came back, they stayed on the farm. And of course the Grove, I was always up in the Grove visiting the ladies up there. At that time there was no telephone or anything up there, so that was my job. If somebody got born and they called, I would go up and tell the people up there. And give them all good news and sometimes sad news. And then we always shopped at Dean's, which is in South Canaan, right next to the church there. Every Friday we'd trundle in the car and go down there, and we usually didn't buy very much because we had most of our stuff, but we would go, and I think he also sold grain too, I'm not sure. And one thing I can remember about that is he always had calendars of the Dion quintuplets. And I was amazed that one woman had so many babies. And I would stare at that thing for hours. And that's one thing I remember about his store.
Edmund Dean, or George Dean.
His dad. But you'd go down there and you know, we didn't have TV. You didn't get a newspaper every day. So if you wanted the news of the week, you would go there and get it, or go to the bar room. That was how you'd find out what was going on and what your neighbors were doing and what they were doing and what they weren't supposed to be doing.
The bar room, was that at the inn?
The bar room was at the inn, yep. Yeah. And at that time, all the locals went there. It wasn't a fancy place. You know, all your townspeople would go there and meet and decide what they were going to do the next week.
What year did you come over here, Ray?
We were trying to think of that. My son was born in 58, and he was like 6, the oldest son. So 59, 60, 61, 62, 63.
Or 62
About
somewhere.
63, 64.
Somewhere in that age, yeah.
And my father had 3 girls. I had 4 boys.
You had 4 boys.
I had 4 boys.
Uh-huh.
And as I started getting a little older, he said, my father said, I'm either going to sell the farm, or if you want to come over and help me run it, okay. And we did. It was a good place to raise kids, especially boys.
Right here.
Right here.
Uh-huh.
So we came over, and they each had their own chores to do, and they stayed out of jail, stayed out of trouble, mainly because they were busy and were too tired to do anything else when they got home. Now it's up for sale, and it's been sold.
The farm?
Yeah.
Oh.
My oldest son was the farmer, and he died. And after that, I didn't want to do. I felt that it was time to relinquish it to somebody else. My other 3 sons, I didn't want involved in the farm because I really think it helped my son die. The stress was too much.
Wow.
So Jack here is going to buy it, and they're going to keep it into farming, which I'm really happy about. And
Right.
it's time for the next generation.
Yeah, yeah.
You really have to either have 2 incomes or have a big farm to do anything nowadays. It's almost impossible to make it. I mean, they're getting less for their milk now than when we quit farming 5 or 6 years ago. How can they do? You can't do that. And what happens is the prices, you start getting good prices, then the farmers put on more cows. They put on more cows, then you get a glut in the market, and the price goes down. I always said there should be a quota, but everybody's always shot me down and said, nah, you don't want a quota. Well, farmers are independent. No, they don't want a quota, but there's got to be some way that you can do it so that it doesn't fluctuate so much. That was one of the problems we had. It fluctuated so much.
The price. How many cows did you...
At one time we had about 300 or 400 cows.
I didn't know that.
And we milked about, what, 200?
200 for 20-some years.
Yeah.
Year-round.
Yeah.
Is it true that cows give more milk if they're kept in the barn?
Cows give more milk if they're happy.
If you keep a cow happy
If you
and
keep-
comfortable,
Then you'll
she
get
will
your...
produce for you.
And I don't think it makes any difference whether you're in the barn or whether you're out in pasture.
No.
It's, you've got to keep them comfortable. We had a guy come in twice a year and give them a pedicure, cut their toenails, because their toenails grow so long that when they walk, it bothers them. So if you have them hoofed twice a year, then they're more comfortable. You try to put, like, days like this, you'd have fans in the barn or underneath the free stalls so that they would be
Fresh
cooler
air.
for them. Lots of farmers, when they came in the milking parlor, they had a spray that they would spray them to cool them off before they came in the milking parlor. I really feel that the happier the cow is and the better fed, the better you are. We had a nutritionist who would formulate, take the silage and the haylage and test it to see what proteins and stuff were in it, and then he would tell us what kind of a ration to feed the cows.
How many times did you feed them a day?
Twice a day, was it,
Twice
Ray?
a day.
Yeah, twice a day.
Once in the morning and once around about 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
And milking, how many times?
Twice. We weighed them.
Twice a
2
day.
times a day.
Did you have to do that yourselves?
Sometimes. Let me say that the girls were not allowed on the farm.
Your girls?
My sisters and me. My mother
Oh.
was old-fashioned, and we weren't allowed on the farm. The men would talk bad language, and she didn't want us to hear that, and we weren't allowed to come on the farm.
Really?
We could come visit and pet the calves, but not to stay.
Huh.
As I got older, then after Ray and I came over, I started doing the finances and the books. But before that, it was very rarely that we were allowed to come on the farm.
How many brothers and sisters did you have?
I had 2 sisters.
2 sisters. Your father had the brothers.
My father had the brothers.
Okay.
And then when I had kids, I had the men.
You had 5 boys.
4 boys.
4 boys. And
And he was in pig heaven then, you know. Now he's got the boys.
to work on the farm.
Got
to
all
do
the
the
workers now.
I can remember the first tractor we got was an Oliver, and Tracy Atwood's dad took over caretaking Pine Grove when my father left. And he had a John Deere, and it put, 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 put. And we could always tell when he left the house over at Pine Grove and started up the hill. We'd say, "Here comes Mr. Atwood," and sure enough, up the hill he'd come with the tractor, puff, puff, puffing away. My father always used to make fun of him with his puffy tractor. Well, we ended up with John Deere's too.
Yeah, but they didn't go puff puff.
No, they didn't go puff, puff. We had bigger ones than that. We used to sell grain. My father sold, what's the Eastern States, and
Sold hay in the summer months, winter months too.
yeah, and they'd bring them in the railroad cars uptown, and we'd have to go up and unload them and deliver them to the different farmers.
Uptown would be North Canaan.
North Canaan, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Used to come in there, just where it used to be Brewer's automobile dealership. They used to come in just north of that and park, and then we had a certain length of time to get up there and empty them cars out. Because they wouldn't leave them more than a couple of days.
This is grain that you took up there?
You know, that's grain that they delivered to us.
Oh.
That was in
Citrus
bags.
pulp and stuff like that from anywhere they could get it. Ship it up, and they come in great big huge bags. We'd have to take them out of there and put them on our truck and bring them down here or deliver them to somebody. And it was quite a chore to dig them out of a rail car after they've been bouncing around for a while.
Yeah. Who did you have to help you with that, Ray?
Well, Uncle Tim and
Freddie?
Uncle Freddie, the
Yeah.
brothers, you know.
Yeah.
My father was a hustler. That was extra money,
Yeah,
you know.
usually it was Freddie, and Tim and myself that did the unloading of the cars.
How often did you have to do that?
Oh,
About once a month.
once a month anyhow, at least
Uh-huh.
once a month, yeah.
What was the hardest work that you had to do?
Hardest work? Getting up in the morning. That's the hardest thing. Every morning you had to be over the barn at 5 o'clock. Yeah. And you worked. There wasn't no standing around. You worked all that time. When you finished one job, you had another one you had to go right to.
What were some of the jobs, Ray?
We used to scrape the upper barn out by hand with a scraper.
Is that with the manure?
No, scrape it in a drop and then clean the drop and then make sure they had bedding underneath the cows that you kept up in the winter months or even during summer months when some of them would get ready to calve. We kept them in the barn so we could watch them closer. We had to clean all that out every day, 7 days a week.
You did a lot of feeding too.
And then later on when Freddie went slowing down and I went in and did some of the milking with Albert for a good many years and learned how to feed the cows and stuff like that. And then when he started getting sick, he got me to take the milk over and do it myself. But he still kept the feeding chart up to his house. They got it from, they had a milk tester come in and test everything in that way. We knew what to give the cows and stuff and how much to give to each one.
Well, the milk tester would come in and test the amount of pounds each cow gave. So you would know what cows were producing and what cows weren't producing.
Uh-huh.
Once you knew what cows weren't producing, then you would decide whether it was the feed they were getting, or whether they were just needed to be
time-
replaced.
Time to dry them off, or if they wasn't milking that much and they wasn't that good of a cow, you would dry them off and sell them for beef
Huh.
years ago, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Didn't hang on like they do today. Well, even today that they don't.
No, if you're a good farmer, you don't hang
Yeah.
on to them if they're not producing the
No,
milk.
if you don't make enough for it, where you could total it up for the year, if you're not making a certain amount of money from them, you get rid of them because they're not helping you.
On a good day, the average cow would yield how much milk?
You'd have to ask him.
Well, for a long time, it was only around about 30, 40 pounds.
30, 40 pounds?
Yeah, that's for the whole day.
But now it's more.
Now they're talking 100 pounds, 200 pounds a day from an animal. That's the way they've increased it. So, but you breed your animals for better when, every time they have a calf, you breed it to a better stock, and that way you build your herd up slowly instead of trying to do it all at once. And it works out real good. They're still doing that today.
And that's another thing. We always had a breeder come in to breed the cows.
Yeah, they always
So
have a
then
breeder
you'd
come
check,
in.
you'd keep track of the sires and know which sires you want for different traits. We had one uncle that would spread manure. One day he parked the manure spreader over underneath where you push the manure out onto the spreader. One of the cows decided that looked like a lovely bed. So she walked out, laid down on the manure spreader. And my uncle got in the tractor, got all the way up around the barn and all ready to go out the driveway before we yelled at him enough so he realized the cow was in there.
Then he turned around and looked at what there was on top of the spreader.
Do cows have personalities?
Oh,
Oh,
sure
yeah,
they do.
you better believe they do.
Especially Jerseys. That was my son's favorite cow, Jersey. And my father was a Holstein man. And my son brought a Jerseys home. And he says, get those pets out of here. Well, the Jerseys stayed. And we were always afraid that they were going to, the Holsteins would chase them away. Because Holsteins are the black and white ones that are pretty good size. Jerseys are the little feminine ones that look like deer. They're kind of a
Chubby person.
a tannish kind of a cow, and small in stature. Well, the first time we took the Jerseys over there we fed them in like a bunker, so that you put the grain out and it was self-serve. The Jerseys chased the Holsteins. The Holstein didn't chase the Jerseys. And they're great at opening fences. You lock them in and they're out.
If you have a gateway that you go in and out of, you want to have that so when you go out, you want to have it so the cow cannot lick it, because she'll come over as soon as you leave and start licking the chain, trying to get it loosened up. If she gets it loosened up, the gate will open up and she just walks out. That's the way it works. So you had to make it sure, so they started licking the chain, they weren't going to get it open. We had to do that a lot. Just about every pen that we made in there, even in the barn, when we put them in the calves and raise them in the barn, even the calves would watch you enough times, and if you didn't put the wooden handle down, they would come over and lick it, and the door would open up, and they'd be out running around the
They
barn.
butt it with their head too.
Yeah, they was no dumb animals, I'm telling you.
Uh-huh.
They was pretty smart.
Pretty smart?
Yeah, they see you do it enough times. They as soon as if you're cleaning their pen, as soon as you walked out and closed the door, they would be overlooking and licking everything and see if they could get something that was loose. They would. It was comical, but.
Is it a stupid question for me to ask? Did you have favorite cows?
Oh, as I said, I wasn't allowed in the barn, so I
Oh,
wasn't
okay.
allowed to get close to the cows.
Butchie had favorite cows.
Butch, my son, did. Of course, they were Jerseys. He had favorite cows.
He had favorite cows, and he could just call their name if they was outside, and they'd come running right over to him. He didn't have to go look for them. They'd come
Is
right
that
to him.
right?
They knew his voice and everything.
Uh-huh.
They-
Which was your oldest?
That was the
The
oldest.
The oldest one?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That's probably about the hardest job, is loading hay. And you can't find anybody to do it anymore. When I was a kid, you'd give them a six-pack of beer and they'd work all day. Now they won't do that. And you're kind of afraid to have anybody help either, because if they hurt their back or something like that,
You're liable.
then you're liable. So, we did square bale up until the end, but we did a lot of round baling, which helped, because there wasn't that much, there was not much grunt work. You just round baled it, and then you had a tractor with prongs that would poke the bale, and you could move it that way. There was no manual labor involved in it.
See, we'd bale the square bales on the trailers and have 7 trailers sitting in the yard. And when they got done come back from breakfast from milking, there would be a crew go up in the hay mow, and then another guy would chuck the hay off on the elevator to go up in the hay mow, and they had to stack it all the way up.
Now that's probably about the hardest work.
That was a lot of work.
And it
Putting
was-
the square bales on the elevator?
Yeah.
Running them up in there.
That was mechanical?
Yeah, yeah.
Ran off a tractor, maybe?
No,
No,
plug,
no,
you had a
was
motor.
There was we put an electric motor on it and ran it, and they didn't start it until we didn't start it up until the guys were up in the mow. And then when they hollered, then we started unloading it, and we put it in, there was, maybe 4 feet sections in the elevator that goes up every 4 feet. We try to put a bale in every one of the 4 feet. If it was going too fast, they'd holler, then you had to go to the third one and slow it down a little bit. Because they just can't, when you gotta chuck it, and you put it in them little cubicles on the side of the barn, you see the elevator was in that, you got probably 60 or 70 feet to the end of the barn or to the center of the barn where you gotta travel it. And you gotta be a guy in a little elevator checking it, chuck it to the next guy, and he's gotta chuck it to another guy that puts it in place. And that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. And as you get higher to the roof, it gets pretty hot up in there.
Well, it's hot anyway, never mind
Yeah, and
getting
it's
to
hot anyhow, but
Yeah.
and that's how we put it in.
Let me ask you about the machinery, Ray. You took care of the machinery?
No, John did, my other son.
Well,
Your other
yeah,
son.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
and he
after-
helped.
I did a lot of the repairing and everything till John came along, and then when he come along, I did more or less taking care of all the equipment that I was using. And if little thing was wrong with it, I'd bring it in at noontime or at the end of the day, and I'd tell John this had to be fixed, so I'm ready to go on the first in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning, so I can get going. And he would, most of the time, he'd fix it. But then I'd be back in, because he didn't want to listen to me. He didn't want to fix it the way I told him to fix it, so I'd be back in at the end of the day sometime, fixing it again. And then I told him, well, please fix it the right way I told you to do it. And he did that, and then everything seemed to calm down and work right. But it was kind of hard to teach the young ones, because their idea of fixing something and my idea of fixing something, I figured out fixing it, it's going to be permanent. It ain't going to break again. And that's the way I always ran the farm, and it worked out pretty good.
And we did most of our repair work.
Yeah, we did most all of our repair work. Very seldom we had to take anything up to get it fixed.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Where did you learn how to do that?
Trial and error, I guess.
Trial and error, and me, when I was born on the farm years ago and worked on the farm, I knew how it was running. And of course, that farm, they was milking 100 and some cows that time, and they was milking all these cows by hand in a bucket. All of them cows. You realize what people worked at that time, and did things the way they supposed to. Now all the milk, all them cows, it was more than what people think. So, and I milked some of the cows when I was younger, helping my father out in the barn, and it's no easy chore to sit down on a cow that don't know you. She don't want you to touch her. You can get kicked. You'll kick your bucket over and you just about get it full. Now that you wasted all that milk, and it's a lot of things that you got to understand with animals. But I did all that stuff myself.
When
It
you-
wasn't easy work. When you're trying to go to school and going out and doing that. The weekends wasn't too bad because you didn't have to go to school, but during the week, then I had to, when we go to school, I had to walk to school, which was a mile down and a mile back every day.
This
Walking.
is back in Armenia?
That's in Armenia.
Back in
yeah.
Armenia.
And it was, we call it Delavan Hill. It's a great big steep hill just as you're leaving where the railroad tracks are, straight up. About a good quarter of a mile up there on top before it starts leveling off. You had to go up that and you got to go another 3/4 of a mile to get to where the house was. You had to do that twice a day. And in the winter months, it was pretty cold.
To sum it up, farming was a great life.
Farming was a great life.
It was a great life.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you both very much.